Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Telecom Talk Show. My name is Tana Singh Thakur, and joining us today is a special guest, Sylwia Kechiche. She's the principal analyst for enterprise at Ookla. Sylwia, why don't you just go ahead and give a sort of a brief introduction as to what you do to the listeners of our podcast?
Great to be here, and thank you for inviting me over tonight. So very quickly, I don't know if you heard of Ookla, but Ookla is the company behind Speed Test. And if you ever try to find out how good your internet is, you probably use the app, right? So upload,
True.
download. But what many people don't know, we also own Down Detector. So that's another company, great tool to find out what's going on in terms of the internet, whether the internet is down, if it's your service provider, or is it, let's say, I don't know, Instagram or LinkedIn not working. So that's Ookla as a whole. So Ookla's mission is to make the connectivity better, faster, and more accessible to everyone. So my function within the company, I'm an analyst. I'm a telecom analyst. I look at what's going on across the different countries, what's the regulation, what's the investment trends we're seeing, and then translating this to users and to readers. So for instance, looking at India, what's what we've seen in terms of 5G spectrum auction, what the impact that could be on India as a whole to the speeds, but also to the general use cases and so on. So that's very quickly what I do, just trying to figure out what's going on in the industry as a whole.
Roger, Sylwia. Now, Sylwia, the next leap of connectivity or next generation connectivity for India would be around the Satcom industry, right? Because while the other markets have already matured in this area, India is still, at the starting or early phase. Now, how soon do you think will it be commercially available, the Satcom services for the consumers in India?
Sure. So what is quite interesting tonight is that we already see satellite being offered to enterprises. So enterprises, the governments that have been using satellite for quite a while, the main issue is the prices. So the prices are quite steep. So therefore you can't really afford it. But with the emergence of low orbit satellites such as Starlink, we all heard of Starlink. The prices are getting lower. They're not necessarily super low. You're still thinking about $500 for the equipment, and then around $100 to pay for it. But when in India, it's obviously very expensive. But there's lots of developments happening in industry related to spectrum. So awarding spectrum in 27.5 gigahertz. But what we're seeing and what we're hearing is that the commercial availability can come as early as mid next week. So that's what we've been hearing from the government. That's what we've been hearing from Geo, from OneWeb, and the others. So keep your fingers crossed. It's going to happen sometime next year.
Now, Sylwia, the $1 million question for me is, you already addressed this part, which is the cost for the consumers. Because India is a very price-sensitive market, the mobile data is already one of the most affordable across the world in India. And when we talk about even the fixed broadband connections, fiber connectivity, it's still at a price which is quite affordable for many Indians. But when it comes to, companies such as Starlink, I just, for my entertainment, I just compared the prices that were being offered in other countries. Even if they were brought down by giving subsidies or discounts, I think it would still be a very expensive affair for the Indian consumers. Now, how do you think will the consumers react to this?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. And satellite broadband is often confirmed and put against 5G fixed wireless access. So what we see and what's quite interesting when you look at the US, it's one of the most developed markets in the world, there is a government scheme to enable affordable internet to everybody. So rural areas, similar to India, they don't have much access to fixed networks. So fiber networks don't reach it and so on. So unfortunately, at the beginning, the prices will be steep. And we've seen this with Viasat, we've seen this with Starlink, we've seen this with others in the US. That's not going to change. So probably it's going to be just early adopters at the very, very start. Unless there's going to be a massive change in terms of the cost. Because the real cost, you think about it, is you need the equipment to be able to translate the satellite signal into your home, right? So the base station, the ground station, but also the cost of the equipment within the home, the CPE. That's the idea. And then you think about, the cost of data, it comes straight from the space. So, it's not as cheap as providing mobile services. But as with everything, with economy of scale, this will go down. The prices will go down. Whether or not it's going to be as cheap as mobile data, that's another question. But we've heard OneWeb saying that they will try to make its pricing similar to data. But at the beginning, at the very start, as always, that's going to be more expensive than mobile.
Now, Sylwia, what can India actually learn from other matured markets when it comes to the Satcom sector?
Tanya, that's a great question. And I've been looking at this, and it's quite interesting because every quarter we compare the Starlink performance across quite a lot of countries. So, Starlink at the moment is in about 37 countries, have about 400,000 customers. So that was around in June, up for like over, I think, 225,000 in May. So not growing massively, right? So Starlink is not growing massively. It's enterprise and government services that have been operating for over a year. So very slow growth when you think about it. And the waiting list is massive. So when we look at how they perform in terms of speeds in Canada and US, they're still below what the fixed operators can offer. And part of it is because, obviously in rural areas, but it's not also about download upload speed. The slight challenge with satellite is the latency. So, the latency is going to be much, much higher than what you get with fiber. Fiber, you have very, very small latency. With the satellite, it goes quite far. So that's that. But what really interesting thing is that, like in some countries, like in Puerto Rico, in some of the other Latin American countries, satellite is actually faster than other fixed providers. So there's opportunity there to make it faster. But again, it's still very small pockets. It is quite often being subsidized. So going to rural areas, ensuring that people that do not have access to any other infrastructure, it's not really cost effective to roll out fiber in some of those remote rural areas. So there's going to be a mix of different things going on there. And one thing I want to bring your attention to, and I don't know if this is well now, is satellite has a really important role to play when it comes to 5G as well. Because as you know, fiber adoption and fiberization of towers is not necessarily very, very great in India. So satellite as a backhaul plays a really important role in that. So, even if we think, we might not have benefit directly from satellite, the indirect benefit it's quite good because, you need to have that access. If you don't have the dark fiber being laid out, you need to have some sort of a backhaul.
Yeah, true, Sylwia. I think the Indian government this year itself only they allowed the telecom operators to use Satcom spectrum or Satcom services as backhaul. So I think that would be great for even us as consumers to experience. What sort of the difference is. But Sylwia, while it comes at a greater cost, what are some of the benefits that the technology promises?
So, obviously, the main benefit is being available in remote areas. So, as I mentioned, rolling out fiber to those areas is extremely hard. So, even if you want to have 5G based connectivity or any other connectivity, you need to be able to extend. So that's the key benefit is the accessibility and availability in remote and rural areas. And then, you don't really need that much of infrastructure behind it. You still do need it, but again, what's really interesting, and I think that's quite an interesting case. In the US, Starlink started offering satellite for the camper vans. So as people move, you can take the satellite on the road with you, and wherever you go, you're gonna have access to the internet. So again, by the very nature, satellite is much easier to deploy, and you can have pretty much anywhere. Another important thing is, and that's starting to emerge, is the direct to phone satellite services. So these are emerging in Africa, but also in the US. You have the latest iPhone having actually access to emergency services via satellite, and we've heard T-Mobile in the US planning to offer also direct to satellite communication. So satellite, not only as a broadband, but in general as a mean of communication, is becoming ever so important, as we expect this always on connectivity, being connected anywhere. And then, obviously it's not cost effective to roll out networks everywhere. So again, satellite comes into play as that. So the wide reach, I would say, is the most benefit.
Okay. Well, Sylwia, you already touched upon this. You said that 5G and satellite services are going to coexist. Now, I would like to take your views on whether Indian TSPs are actually geared up for this.
Yeah, so they're very busy rolling out 5G, and that's something that we see across the country. Very ambitious plans. We've seen really fast speeds. We've published an article a couple of weeks ago when we look at initial speeds between Airtel and Jio in quite a few markets, and because the networks are still not fully commercial, so being tested, we can see really fast speeds in there. Obviously, with time, this will slow down. But really interesting, what we see is also the figuring out the best use cases. So there's also enterprise opportunity in there, and being able to offer different services. With 5G standalone, as in when it comes, you can think about network slicing, private networks, enabling, also different use cases, the lower latency and so on. On the consumer side, obviously, you think about gaming. We've seen like gaming and video being one of the key things that users and consumers in India, as per our consumer survey, are the most interesting in using and looking, doing it using 5G. So that's on the 5G, but also we're seeing, Hughes Communication India, which is the joint venture between Hughes Networks and Bharti Airtel, rolling out and being quite active. And they have recently, I think in October, launched services. And again, they already have 200,000 customers, mostly enterprise and governments, and they know they're very expensive. So there's not that much you can do on the consumer side at the moment. But you have Geo Space Technology. Again, Geo in February this year partnered with SES Luxembourg, and in September got the Department of Telecommunication approval to launch the broadband service as well. But there's lots of happening. Starlink's still waiting to be approved, waiting for the regulatory approval. You have the Telesat, Nelco partnering, so the Tata Group in there. You have obviously Amazon just waiting around there with the Project Kuiper. So a lot of players trying to enter the market, because obviously it's one of the largest markets. So there are opportunities. So yeah, that's on the satellite side. On the 5G, obviously, very vibrant ecosystem. We see already adoption starting to happen with the use cases being developed.
Now, Sylwia, one of the places where India is stuck at the moment is related to spectrum for Satcom companies. Now, the industry currently stands divided. There are some who believe it should be administratively allocated, and then there are some who believe that it should be given via an auction route. Now, what are your thoughts on this?
So, as you said, it's always a very hotly debated topic, Tanai, especially in India. We've seen it with the 5G spectrum auction, and we've seen a lot of discussion happening when the millimeter wave spectrum was being awarded in India. So, as you said, the industry is divided. Obviously, the mobile operators want the spectrum to be auctioned, which it does make sense. Whether the satellite companies would much rather for this to be awarded, but I guess as in other countries, most of the time it's an auction. So probably India would follow the lead of other countries when the spectrum is actually allocated for the use. But yes, as you said, it's always hotly debated topic, and time will tell. But probably auction it will be.
Yeah, well, that will be all from my side, Sylwia. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for letting me pick your brain, and I wish you all the best for your future.
Thanks, Anani. It's great to be here and discuss it with you this morning. Thank you.